They didn't just fire me. They didn't just steal my work. They framed me. They took 5 years of my life. 5 years of concrete walls and the sound of steel bars grinding shut every single night. My boss, Elias Thorne, and my fiancée, yes, my fiancée, they took the greatest achievement of my career, the Ethelgard Tower, the building that was supposed to define me as an architect, and they built their entire empire on top of my name, while I rotted in a federal prison. But here's the thing they forgot. I designed every inch of that tower, every secret passage, every structural weakness, every digital backdoor. And when I got out, I didn't come back for revenge. I came back to be the demolition crew. This is the story of how I tore their world apart, not with explosives, but with something far more terrifying, the weight of their own lies. If you've ever felt powerless, if you've ever been betrayed by the people closest to you, if you've ever dreamed of watching justice finally catch up to the people who wronged you, then you need to stick around for this one. Hit that like button, subscribe. My name is Julian Vance, and before all of this, I was a guy who actually had everything figured out. I was a senior architect at Thorne Enterprises, one of the most prestigious architectural firms in the city. Not just any architect, I was the golden child, the visionary, the guy who stayed late every night, sketching designs that made people stop and stare. The Ethelgard Tower wasn't just a building, it was art. 72 stories of glass and steel and geometry that made you feel something when you looked at it. My boss was Elias Thorne. He was this magnetic guy, you know? Expensive suits, expensive cologne, a smile that could convince you to give him your house keys. He was the businessman. He took my designs and he sold them. He was good at it, really good at it. And Sarah, Sarah was my fiancée. We'd been together for 3 years. We were planning our wedding. We had a Pinterest board. We argued about whether the napkins should be ivory or cream. We had a whole life mapped out. Sarah was brilliant too, a corporate lawyer. Sharp, ambitious, the kind of woman you see and you think, yeah, she's going places. We all worked in the same building, and we all saw each other every single day. What I didn't realize was that they saw each other a lot more than that. The day everything changed, Elias called me into his office. His mahogany office with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The same office where he'd once told me I was the future of architecture. The same office where he'd promised me that the Ethelgard Tower would make my name. He slid a stack of documents across his desk. Emails, financial transfers, digital records, all of them proving, or at least, appearing to prove, that I had stolen the designs for the Ethelgard Tower and sold them to our largest competitor. Every single one was a forgery. I knew it immediately, but they were good forgeries. I don't understand, I said. My voice was small. I could feel my hands shaking. Elias, this isn't real. You know this isn't real. And then Sarah walked out from the adjoining office. She'd been listening the whole time. She wouldn't look at me, but I saw her hand brush Elias's shoulder as she walked past him. Just for a second. Just enough. The knife twisted. Julian, she said, and her voice was ice. The evidence is irrefutable. Irrefutable. Like we were already in court. Like she'd already made her decision about who to believe. We have to let you go, Elias said. But more than that, I'm going to have to report this to the authorities. I can't protect you, the firm's reputation. I want to tell you that I fought back, that I screamed, that I demanded to see a lawyer right there in his office. But I didn't. I just walked out. Numb, confused, like my brain couldn't process what had just happened. The arrest came 3 days later. The trial was a masterpiece of manipulation. Key witnesses changed their stories under cross-examination. Witnesses I later learned Elias had paid off. My defense attorney seemed more interested in negotiating a plea deal than actually defending me. The prosecutor presented the forged documents like they were the word of God. The judge didn't even blink. 5 to 7 years in a federal maximum security facility. I remember standing on the courthouse steps, watching as they led me away in handcuffs. And there they were, Elias and Sarah, standing together, holding hands, not even trying to hide it anymore. The look on her face wasn't guilt. It wasn't regret. It was relief. Like they'd finally solved a problem. Like I was a problem they'd finally solved. That's when I realized, this wasn't just a corporate move. This wasn't just about protecting the firm. This was calculated, intentional, premeditated. They had planned this. Prison changes a man. Not in the way people talk about on TV, with sad violin music and transformation montages. It's worse than that. Prison strips away everything. Your identity. Your dignity. Your sense of control. It replaces it all with one singular, burning focus, survival. But for me, survival wasn't enough. For the first 8 months, I was angry. Furious. The kind of anger that eats you from the inside out. I got into fights. I punched walls until my knuckles split open. I screamed into my pillow every night. And then, during my second year, something shifted. I was in the prison library, it was the only place that made sense to me anymore, and I realized something: rage is a weapon, but it's a blunt instrument. It destroys the wielder as much as the target. I needed to be smarter. I started reading. Not novels or philosophy, though I did plenty of that. I read about cybersecurity, about financial forensics, about psychology. I read about how corporate fraud worked, how people's minds worked when they were afraid, how to exploit the weaknesses that everyone carries around without even knowing it. I spent my prison years building a blueprint. Not of a building this time, of a plan. A plan to destroy them. Not physically. That was never going to be the play. But emotionally? Financially? Professionally? Completely. I wanted to take everything they had. Every dollar. Every connection. Every shred of reputation. And I wanted them to understand, fully and completely, that it was me who took it. Not some cosmic accident. Not bad luck. But me, reaching out from the shadows and toppling their empire brick by brick. The first time I smiled in prison was the day I finished that plan. 4.5 years later, I walked out of those gates. The guard at the exit barely looked at me. I was nobody. Nobody remembered Julian Vance by then. My case had faded from the news cycle months ago. Elias had already built 5 more towers. Sarah was living in the penthouse of the Ethelgard Tower, wearing designer clothes and attending charity galas. But I knew something they didn't. I had money. Before my arrest, I'd been paranoid enough, or maybe just lucky enough, to move a significant portion of my savings into an offshore account. The same offshore accounts that Elias and Sarah had tried to frame me with. But I'd managed to secure access to one of them before the handcuffs went on. It wasn't a fortune. But it was enough. Enough to disappear. Enough to become someone else. And that's exactly what I did. Julian Vance, architect, died on the day I was sentenced. In his place, I became Marcus Croft. Independent consultant. Specialist in corporate turnarounds and high-stakes development deals. Mysterious. Well-connected. Exactly the kind of person who would catch Elias Thorne's attention. The websites were easy to set up. The fake credentials took longer. The shell companies took even longer. But I had time. And I had focus. Then I made my move. Elias was expanding. By the time I got out, he'd built an empire. The Ethelgard Tower was still his flagship, but he had projects all over the world. New York. London. Dubai. Singapore. Each one more ambitious than the last. Each one supposedly designed by him, built on his genius, fueled by his vision. The arrogance was almost beautiful to watch. I approached him as Marcus Croft, at an industry conference. I was confident. Polished. The kind of guy who doesn't need anything from you, but who might be willing to do you a massive favor. Elias Thorne, I said, extending my hand. I've been following your work. Remarkable stuff. He lit up like a Christmas tree. Ego is a narcotic, and I had just given him a hit. I'm actually working on something in Dubai, I said. Crown jewel development. Biggest project I've ever been involved with. I need someone to handle the business side. Someone with vision. Someone who understands how to make magic happen in the real estate world. He leaned in. I had him. Over the next 3 months, I became his right-hand man. I had access to everything. His financial records. His emails. His text messages. His secret offshore accounts. I was installing spyware on his servers the whole time, layer upon layer of digital surveillance. He had no idea. And what I found was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Thorne Enterprises, the irony was so thick you could carve it with a knife. He'd framed me for corporate espionage. And all the while, he was committing actual, comprehensive, decades worth of federal prison level fraud. I documented everything. Every email. Every transaction. Every bribe. I built a case so airtight that the FBI could prosecute him with one hand tied behind their back. But I wasn't done yet. Next, I turned my attention to Sarah. Sarah was predictable. Ambitious. Vain. She'd married Elias for his money and his status. She had everything she thought she wanted: the penthouse, the Birkin bags, the Instagram-worthy life. But she was bored. I could see it in the way she looked at other men at parties. The way she complained about Elias's obsession with work in the WhatsApp group chats I'd hacked. So I created a fantasy for her. I hired an actor, a charming, genuinely attractive guy, and presented him as a European prince. Aristocratic. Wealthy. Mysterious. Everything Elias wasn't, because Elias was familiar and therefore boring. I set up chance encounters. A party. A restaurant. A luxury resort where Sarah happened to be. Elias had always loved a stage. The annual Foreign Enterprises Gala was his Super Bowl. It was held in the penthouse of the Ethelgard Tower, the building that I designed. The building that was supposed to be mine. The entire city's elite would be there. Politicians. Business leaders. Celebrities. Celebrities who needed the Thorn brand to seem legitimate, and Elias who needed them to make his brand seem important. It was the perfect theater for the finale. I timed everything perfectly. The financial forensic report, the one I'd compiled documenting all of Elias's fraud, was leaked to the FBI and every major news outlet exactly 45 minutes before his keynote speech. I didn't release it myself. I had a contact on the inside do it, someone with no connection to me whatsoever. By the time Elias took the stage, the FBI was already moving through the building. The penthouse had a massive LED screen, state-of-the-art, that was supposed to play a highlight reel of his accomplishments. His greatest moments. His triumph. But I'd hacked into it months before. So when he stepped up to the microphone and the lights dimmed and the screen came alive, it wasn't his highlight reel. It was a live feed from Sarah's phone. A conversation between Sarah and her prince. And she was confessing everything. The affair. The plan to divorce Elias and take half his fortune. How she and Elias had worked together to frame me in the first place, how it was the only way to get rid of him, how they'd laughed about it afterward. Every word. Every confession. Broadcast to 300 of the most important people in the city. The silence that followed. Pause. There's no sound in the world quite like it. It's the sound of a man's entire world collapsing in real time. Elias stood frozen. His face drained of color. His mouth opened and closed like he was drowning in air. I wasn't there in person, but I had cameras everywhere. I watched as he looked out at the crowd and saw nothing but disgust and betrayal staring back at him. Then the FBI agents moved in. They came through the crowd with purpose and professionalism, and they placed Elias Thorn under arrest. They read him his rights as the entire city's elite watched. They put handcuffs on him, handcuffs, just like they'd done to me 5 years before, and they let him out of his own penthouse. Sarah screamed. I mean, she actually screamed. Because she just realized that her prince wasn't a prince. He was an actor I'd hired. She just confessed to conspiracy and fraud on live camera to hundreds of witnesses. The FBI placed her under arrest too. I stood in the shadows of the Ethelgard Tower, the building I designed, that they'd stolen from me, and I watched it all happen. The police cars drove away into the night. Elias Thorn faced federal charges for wire fraud, money laundering, bribery, and obstruction of justice. Prosecutors were recommending a sentence of 20 to 30 years. Sarah faced conspiracy charges, fraud charges, and evidence tampering. Her legal bills would bankrupt her. Her reputation was obliterated. Her marriage was over. She'd be lucky if she wasn't serving time herself. And the Ethelgard Tower, it was still beautiful. Still brilliant. still mine, even if my name wasn't on it. They say justice is blind. But sometimes, just sometimes, justice gets its eyes wide open. And it sees everything. I spent 5 years losing my freedom so that they could keep theirs. And then I spent the same amount of time dismantling everything they built, brick by brick, lie by lie, until there was nothing left but rubble and regret. The architect of ruin had completed his masterpiece. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt the cool, clean air of freedom. If this story gave you chills, absolutely crush the like button. Subscribe to this channel because we post stories like this every week, stories of karma, justice, and people who refuse to stay down. And drop a comment. What's the most satisfying act of revenge you've ever witnessed? Have you ever seen someone finally get what they deserve? I'm reading every comment, and I'll be replying to my favorites. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.